Growing up in the streets of London, I've seen some pretty dark things. From stories of drug abuse and sexual violence to gang culture and suicide. Most of these issues remain a taboo within the Muslim community, but I want to explore these issues, how they affect Muslims, and what we can do to change them. One in 20 children within the UK has experienced sexual abuse. Over 90% of those children knew the abuser. 20% of women from the age of 16 upwards have experienced some sort of sexual abuse. And 4% of men have also experienced some form of sexual abuse. However, strangely, 5 out of 6 people who experience sexual abuse don't even report it. So I want to find out, how prevalent is it within the Muslim community? How prevalent is it within wider society? And what are we doing as a community to deal with the issue? And how is it that we can solve the problem going forward? To start off my journey, I needed to understand to what extent sexual abuse impacts our community. And to help me with this, I visited Bazana Karwal, who has dealt with survivors of sexual abuse in the community firsthand. She told me some truly shocking and heartbreaking stories.
I have a case where a girl, she was how we have family friends come over, get together, Uncle G and Auntie G and whatever. So there was an uncle, and it's quite normal. I mean, to place a child on your lap, on your knee, maybe rock the child depending on age, and play with the child in a public arena. But this child, obviously, she thought it was nice, whatever. The perpetrator used that situation that, you know, your parents are happy with you being with me and you're happy sitting on my knee, so there's no issue there. And they're not going to believe you because we're close, the whole family's close. So obviously it moved on from just the knee. So as soon as the parents, you know, were more trusting and said, you know what, do you mind babysitting? Or this child grew up and had always kept it quiet because nobody would believe the child. I think at one point maybe she may have mentioned it, but they thought maybe she's misunderstanding what had happened to her.
How can you protect yourself against a family member who's perpetrating the crime, you know? Family members who you've grown up with all your life, you know, uncles, aunts, your mamas, you know, your in-laws. In those circumstances, and sadly, again, from my experience, that is often the most prevalent of circumstances within these victim scenarios. So what do you do then? Somebody has to earn your trust. It's not about just trusting somebody blankly from the start. It's about earning the trust and being vigilant. And yes, as the relationship progresses or as time goes on, you can see that the trust is there. No, somebody that wants to has set out to abuse somebody is not going to wait forever and ever and ever and ever. They're going to move on because their intent is to do something. They know there's a chance that they may not get what they want. They'll move on. They won't bother until the time comes that they do get that. Like most episodes of On The Level, the issues that we cover are topics that have a personal stake with me, in that I've either experienced them myself firsthand or through friends and family have had a second-hand experience of them. So when it comes to sexual abuse, this is something that I really, really wanted to tackle. At 11 years old, I got a private Arabic teacher who was a sheikh, an imam, but from out of the community, but still held the respect that that person would never be questioned to do something untoward. That person would never do something which you could ever think would be even related to sexual abuse. They build their trust with the family. As a family, we're all having lessons. But then slowly, they work their magic, their grooming process. At that point, they told my parents he would be better off having lessons on his own because that way he would advance quicker because you're holding him back. The moment he was alone with me, he started to touch me. And it started with just a little pat on the head, a little stroke on your lap. And before you know it, they work. They move their way to progressing to something more advanced. So as I say, it might be well done for an exercise or a homework and a pat on the head. Next thing it might be, oh, you did really well on that essay, so, you know, as I say, give you a little pat on your lap. Next thing you know, he's asking me to do an exercise and he's unzipping my trousers. When you're 11 years old and this person's been told to be a teacher of reverence, of piety, of something that I should respect, how am I supposed to turn around and say, yo bro, what are you doing? This is un-Islamic, this is wrong. You're touching me in places which I don't even know what they are yet. How can it only be me that's running to the bathroom and hiding? Why is it only me who's cancelling lessons? Why is it me who's acting up and looking for attention now from my parents in other ways? When I'm going through that, my parents are not seeing me as something that is a child crying for help, but rather as a child acting up and being a bad child now. Because naturally, if a man pushes himself on you and you're somebody who's not thinking in the way of homosexuality, you want to assert your maleness. So now promiscuity comes up and you want to find a girl to assert the fact that I am heterosexual and everything else. And so by the age of 13 now, I'm going off the rails Islamically, and my parents are putting it down to being a bad child rather than me actually having something happen to me that's causing me to act this way. Not until I was 25, 26 years old and I was a married man and I was having problems in my marriage that I decided to now actually confront what's happened to me and had to tell my ex-wife at the time, yo, this is the deal. This is what happened to me as a child, and you know what? This is why I've got issues. When you don't talk about it, it manifests in other ways which you won't understand, and ways that you will think maybe are indications of you being a bad person or some way to blame, but in actual truth, as I say, they're just means and ways of you coping with the pressure of dealing with what happened to you. And sometimes it's just an escapism to compartmentalizing and surviving in life, when in fact all you want to do is scream out, I got abused. We can see a pattern emerging, one of denial, blame, shame, guilt, a lack of self-worth, fear. Why is it that victims seem to universally go through these emotions? What can we do to help them? I want to find out more from a professional. What are the solutions for the victims? But at the same time as that, why is it that community thus far have not been able to help us?
There isn't one solution, but there are actions and there's ways that we can be more vigilant. There's ways that we can address, let's say vulnerability. When we see young people, for example, exhibiting certain behavioral patterns, we might be too quick, or parents might be too quick, or adults, in general, might be too quick to, not just to condemn, but to say, we want you to stop displaying that behavior. Right. So the child is acting up, but the child's acting up for a reason, but we're not sometimes concerned with what's behind that. We just want to, we're trying to reform the behavior to get the child to fall back in line.
Would you say there is a pattern of behavior or symptoms which you would be able to observe that might indicate to you that this person has gone through something, or this child has gone through something?
There is that issue when it comes to, say, for example, children that are, let's say, underage, teenagers, whatever, promiscuous behavior, sexually inappropriate behavior. Those are some of the definitely the telltale signs of children that have been either directly abused or maybe been exposed to stuff in inappropriate material that's above their level of maturity, and they're not processing it right. But that's definitely one of the main signs, certain types of sexualized behavior.
For our children themselves, how do we prepare them also to speak out if something is worrying them, or if somebody has approached them in a way that is untoward? I mean, how do we go about educating or making them aware as well?
I think that we've got issues in the Ummah since colonialism, and we've taken on some bizarre or kind of repressed kind of Victorian ideas about sex and then mixed it in with the religion, and so we're a bit prudish and we're a bit repressed, and we're a bit geeky when it comes to some of these things. And I think that helps to compound shame and guilt around when somebody's been abused, or people's inability to explore, to investigate, to deal with the issues. And sometimes there's sometimes a gender issue in many of the cultures where women are shut down. Women are, you find a situation where maybe, like I say, for example, a sister has been a victim of abuse. She's been courageous enough to speak out against it, but then the dominant masculine response is, you've got no shame. How can you talk about this? You know, like you're speaking about sexual issues. How can you disclose this? You're supposed to keep these things private. There's nothing that says if you've been a victim of a crime, you're required to keep that quiet. I've not seen no religious text. And I challenge anybody to provide that religious text that somebody who perpetrated a crime shouldn't come to justice. The issue shouldn't be addressed. What we don't want to do is leave people feeling powerless and alarmed by this discourse, yeah. But one of the best things that people can do is create a relationship with their children where it's okay for them to speak to their parents about anything. You know, when things are off limit, whether it's in the unspoken that's communicated, that you don't talk about certain things, and certain things are repressed, and it brings shame on the family. And if you communicate in that message, that's a dangerous place. But if you communicate to your children that whatever the problem is, son, daughter, whatever, you know, you can speak to your parents. That's a first port. That's the first thing that can be very helpful. The second thing is to educate your children about appropriateness from a relatively reasonable age. You're the parent, you're going to know the child's development, but you need to educate children about at least certain parts of their body and that what's appropriate touching and in terms of washing or somebody's taking care of you. So if somebody crossed the boundaries, they're able to go and say, Mummy or Dad, this happened, wherever it happened, and whoever did X, Y, and Z.
There could be somebody out there right now who is a victim, who's currently undergoing it this moment. But what could you say to somebody out there right now who is listening as to what they should either do themselves or the people around them to notice, or if they are already aware, act upon it?
GP is a place of trust. They're bound by confidentiality, and really they would be a good place to go. I would suggest that you go and make contact with any charity that you think may be able to help, and they will then guide you to the right charity, because a lot of charities network. Abuse is abuse, and you need support with that to overcome the abuse yourself, to deal with the issue, not to block it out. The issue with blocking out is that it will come back. It may come back in a time that you least expect it to come out.
So there you have it. We've spoken to two professionals, and you've also heard my story. From all of that, I suppose what stands out for me is the commonality of the issue. Regardless of age, gender, background, race, so many people have experienced abuse. And it doesn't matter what the degree of abuse is. Abuse is abuse. At the very least, what we need to do is be open about it. Talk to our communities. Engage with the network of professionals that we have at our disposal to help our communities. Most important of all is to ensure that there's an openness between us and the most vulnerable, that being our children. We may not be able to eradicate sexual abuse entirely. However, at the very least, what we need to do is start shedding light on the issue for those who are suffering. So, let's get started.